Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author I am super excited to have here on the show. Now, my guest today is the multi-award winning author of Half a Century Ago. She was born in the Dominican Republic and grew up in the Bronx, New York. She attended NYC Public Schools in the 1970s. She received a BA from Wellesley College, an MA from SUNY at Buffalo, and a doctorate in education from Walden University. She is the first college graduate in her family. And as an educator, she worked at NYC Public High School for 9 years as an English as new language and as an AP Spanish teacher. She also worked in Yonkers Public Schools as a teacher for 25 years and administrative positions. At the beginning of her career as a teacher, she earned the NYC Rookie of the Year for Teacher in 1987, and then later in 2013, she was awarded Yonkers Public Schools Teacher of the Year. And since retiring in 2020, she also provides mentorship to Latina college and doctoral students to support their personal and professional development. She has also coached new and aspiring writers. And she facilitates book discussions at numerous high schools where her publication has been incorporated into the reading curriculum. Her first book portrays the coming of age of an immigrant child in the Bronx, New York in the 1970s. She is the firstborn child of Angel and Andrea Arias, who arrived in New York City in 1969. And her insight into the power of familial bonds and the importance of maintaining a positive outlook serve as invaluable lessons for anyone seeking to overcome their circumstances. And deep, personal, and candid, her heartfelt new memoir is an essential read for those interested in understanding the power of family bonds and resilience in the face of one family member's pain. Stories of My Dad as He Lay Dying, also published in Spanish, narrates the coming together of a family as the patriarch is faced with two devastating diseases during his last days of his life during the spring of 2016. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us give a huge round of applause to our guest today, Dr. Angela Arias. Dr. Arias, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Gabriel.
Awesome. I am so excited to have you here on the show. Now, Dr. Arias, before we begin, as a little icebreaker question, is there a random fact about you that not a lot of people know?
Oh my goodness. I love hard rock and roll and guitar. So I've been to Mana concerts and Santana concerts and other big name concerts.
Ooh, all righty. I like it. I like it. And as a little teaser for our viewers and listeners, without spoiling too much, what can you tell them about your memoir, Half a Century Ago, without spoiling too much?
What can I say about? So I wrote Half a Century Ago straight out of my childhood journals. I've always been a writer since as far as I can remember, I used to write little pieces of paper and just throw them about because I didn't have a journal. And eventually I began to collect those pieces of paper. And then eventually one of my teachers said somewhere when I was, I believe in 9th grade, that is called journaling. And so I bought myself a little book and I used to write things that bothered me most things that bothered me. But because I was also an avid reader, I used to write things about probably characters and situations in books and apply them to myself.
Awesome.
So when it came time so when pandemic hit in 2020 and I was about to retire, I told my students, you need to do something during the lockdown time of pandemic, the 4 months we were all locked in, so that someday in another 20, 30 years, when somebody asks you, so what did you do? You have something meaningful to say. But because I always place myself as an example to my students, I said, I am going to write a book. And they got all excited because my students were the one who always encouraged me, you need to put all of these stories in a book form, because all of these stories I've told my students as a learning part.
That's awesome. That is really, really incredible. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're probably the second teacher turned author that I've had on the show that has had an almost very similar experience where the students were another contributing factor into the creation of one's own manuscript.
Yeah. So eventually I have to write their story, my teaching years. Have to get there mentally yet. And because I promised them all along. I mean, I've been doing promising this for maybe 30 years. Oh, yeah, someday. And many a times students would say, you're going to put me in your story? So they know I have shared some of their own stories with them. You know, if I write it, then I will give it to them too.
Right.
So they expect to someday see. I mean, of course, I have to change names, but
absolutely.
The story is there.
Yes, 100%. So, as a little backdrop, before we dive into half a century ago, let's go back in time a little bit. So, what would you say, in looking back on your life, would be the focal point that really inspired you to pursue writing as not only an outlet to tell your stories, your own personal stories privately, but then down the road, build upon that and tell a story that you want to share with everybody? What would you say is your aha moment?
So back in 9th grade, I was part of the honors program throughout my entire life, from K to 12. But in 9th grade, we were a very close group of friends. And there was a teacher, my 9th grade history teacher, Mr. Reynolds, said to us one day, this is the United States. If you do not put it in writing, it didn't happen. And this is pre-computers, pre-internet, pre-even cell phones. And so that was an aha moment, because then I remember having little conversations with him here and there and telling him about my writing, things that bothered me.
Right.
And then discovering that it was called journaling and the whole bit. And so he continued to say to me throughout my high school career, well, Angela, are you writing? Every once in a while, even when he was no longer my teacher, because it was only 9th and 10th global history. And that stayed in my head to the point where I often told my students, you need to tell your story because nobody else has lived it. And there are actually 2 students, former students that I am mentoring now, who will be writers soon, published writers, who remember that from the time they were in high school.
That's awesome. That is absolutely incredible. And mentoring new writers is something that we are definitely going to be talking about when we get to what I like to call the business side of being an author. But before we get to that, let's talk about your work half a century ago.
Yeah.
So As you were writing and developing the story of half a century ago, what need or desire does your memoir satisfy in your readers? And what promise do you make to them through your narrative?
I believe that, and this I learned from my dad, and I know he learned it from his dad, is that there should always be a positive outlook on life, no matter how difficult times are and situations an individual is going through. There is always something positive out there. And so there are instances and scenes in my book where my dad is walking me to school and the Bronx is burning in the 70s. And my dad always found something. So he would point at, oh, listen to the birds are singing. So that whole attitude of positivity has remained with me. So even on really bad days, and for me, a really bad day is not breathing well as an asthmatic, there is always a bird singing somewhere.
That is a well said statement, Dr. Arias, and I think very, very powerful words to live by. And just in that statement alone, that definitely brings about kind of a very, emotional reaction to that statement, especially for a lot of viewers who are going to be listening. And that's the thing I find very interesting and very fascinating when it comes to writing memoirs, even though I myself have never written a memoir before. I have read memoirs by other authors, whether it's those who are independently published or traditionally published. Memoirs always have an emotional reaction that readers will always find. And with that said, what emotions or experiences do you want your readers to feel while reading your book?
Probably family love. In a family, the definition of family is very wide. There are chosen families. There are natural families. So whatever it is that you have chosen or are part of that it's considered a family, try to find some kind of positive and loving emotion that is within that family unit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of goes into the next question, Dr. Arias, is what will readers gain from half a century ago in terms of solutions, feelings, or learnings that you provide from your story?
I was kind of intentional about this simply because I was, as I mentioned before, writing this at the recommendation of students, young people, that no matter how difficult, if you have a plan, it's your plan. Just go through with it. And so what there is a deviation in the plan, it's still your plan.
Yes.
There is always a plan B and a plan C, but your plan is yours for you to develop, for you to fight for. And if you're really adamant at it, you can make it. I mean, there are parts of my story that talks about my non-guidance counselor. Did not want me or my close friends to attend Ivy League schools. It was very clear. She told us in many, many ways. But guess what? That was our plan. And we all did. Regardless of the fact that we had zero support from her. And that was her job.
Right. Absolutely.
Not just zero support, but negative support. Like she laughed at my friend Jackie and I when She found us in the elevator one day and she goes, ha, ha, you applied to Columbia, NYU, Harvard, Yale, Wellesley College. You're not going to get in there. Minorities don't get in there. And we didn't even know what the term minority was. All I know is something ugly. So,
well, look at you now.
look at us now. You know, we all did go. You know, all the top 5 kids went off to very good schools.
Absolutely. Now, I have a few fan questions that some of my viewers have sent me that they would like to ask you,
Well,
Dr. Arias. And this first question from one of my viewers, they would like to know, what did you learn about yourself as a person when writing half a century ago?
So it's not so much that I learned, it's more that I reaffirmed that I am not a crybaby. And so my siblings mock me and complain that I never cry. And the few times they've seen me cry, they go, "You're crying." And I'm like, I have no tears. It's no time for that. So, because some of these memories are pretty touching. And when I read my journals from literally 45, close to 50 years ago, you know, it was kind of sad, some things. But why would I cry? I had to write. It's no time for crying. I had to move. So it's like reaffirming that.
All right. The next fan question one of my viewers would like to know is, as a writer, are you more detailed, outline-oriented, or will you consider yourself a more sporadic, spontaneous writer?
All of the above, depends on the day and the mood. But I am very organized, and I used to teach the writing process because I taught AP classes, and my students did phenomenally well because I taught them how to do the writing process. So I have to apply myself to me. And of course, then I take my little notes. Like this morning, I wrote notes about some random things, and then I'll make an outline and then follow the outline. It's easier for me. Other writers are different. And there is no time in the day when it's best for me to write. It doesn't matter. It could be 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. I have the same energy if I'm going to write.
Well, that kind of was going to be my next question is, are you more, no, it's fine. Are you more of a night owl, or are you more of like an early morning person?
No, it depends on the mood. You know, it's an artist mood. So,
yes.
So it really depends. You know where I write the best? Very crowded places with a lot of noise. I'm by myself. Yes, like airports, the train station in New York City.
Oh, I'm the complete opposite. I will need to have like as very little noise as possible, which is hard depending on where you go. But wow, I could never do that. I would get so distracted so easily.
No, I can study and do a lot of work in a very crowded, loud place like it's there. I guess because I grew up in New York City.
That is true. That is very, very true. My dad would definitely agree. He also grew up in New York as well.
Okay.
All righty. So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about readers and reviews. So what ultimately has been the feedback like for your book so far? And from your reader engagement or people that you've talked to who have read your book, do you think that your promise to them has been warranted, validated?
Yes, I would say yes. So I am not going to think about the the reviews on Amazon and other platforms. I am going to think about the reviews of the emails I get from random people across the globe, because at the end of my book, my email is there. So I have received emails from just random people saying, I read your book, this is how it impacted me, or they have this question and the other. And also, now that half a century ago, last year became a required reading for 12th grade class in one of the high schools.
Congratulations.
It's very impressive to actually go meet those kids and notice that they actually read the book. Especially boys, especially 17-year-old boys are actually reading it. And I can tell because they annotate their questions on page whatever. This character shows up, and then it shows up again in this other page. Or what will you think, this, that, and the other? And it is very humbling for me to find teenage boys reading this book, because it's about a girl, a little girl, who's a not sexy little girl. It's just a nerd. I'm a nerd. I continue to be a nerd. And I was a nerd as the character Angela in this book. A nerd with a dance, but a nerd nevertheless.
Nice. Very, very nice. So, with that said, Dr. Arias, what unique perspectives or insights do you think readers gain from your memoir that they wouldn't find elsewhere? And I like asking this question for one of two reasons. The first is because, ultimately as authors, we've always been told that, you want your book to have some familiarity to other books in the genre or in the writing style. You also want your book to add something that isn't shown in the genre itself, that your book is adding to, if we look at this from an academic point, the scholarship. It's contributing to the scholarship. So looking at half a century ago, what do you think are the unique perspectives or insights that readers will gain from this book?
Well, before I decided that I was going to write this as a memoir, because originally I thought I was going to write a novel. And so I took courses on how to write a novel and this, that, and the other. I trained myself to be a novelist. And then I said to myself, because of all the research and all the readings I did, I could not find the story from the perspective of an immigrant girl. Not a young woman, not a woman, a young girl. I couldn't find it. So as a researcher, because I do supervise still doctoral dissertations, and so I continue to think as a researcher, the whole idea of an academia is to fill a void or a vacuum or an empty space. And maybe there are some out there. I just haven't found it.
Fascinating.
11-year-old, from the 11-year-old perspective of an immigrant child to the United States. I haven't found it yet.
Absolutely.
There are boys. There is Solito by Zamora, which is phenomenal. But that's from a boy's perspective.
Right.
There is Elsewhere by a writer in Canada, but that's a boy's perspective. And there are plenty of women, young women, like Reina Grande writes about, but that's more of an older person's perspective.
Right. So ultimately, almost just to reiterate, Dr. Arias, is that you wanted your book, from what you've seen, that the stories that you have been seeing is that, most stories similar are either from a young boy's perspective or maybe a young adult woman's story or a teenage woman's story, but never from an 11-year-old immigrant girl story. Like there hasn't been. There maybe are,
I may
not as
be
much.
corrected. If somebody knows, let me know. I love to read it, but I didn't find it.
Nice. So, in a way, your book was, in a way, to a response to tell more stories from voices that aren't getting shown or possibly recognized, so to speak.
Yes.
Awesome. That's really good. That's a really, really good thing to do. And who knows, it may inspire the next generation of writers who write their own stories, which again is something that we're going to be touching on.
Well,
when we get to
I
this
know
topic.
it is already because I am coaching a couple of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you may have already answered this question. So I'm going to tweak it slightly a little bit.
Mhm.
Now, your students, as you mentioned earlier, were one of the many driving factors to get this book out there to tell your story. But I'm very curious. What would you say has disciplined you to not only continue writing, but to hone your writing skills on other projects beyond half a century ago?
Well, I am retired, and I always worked ungodly hours because I'm an immigrant, and that's what we do. And I'm a woman, and that's what women do. So I can't just see myself sitting at home doing what? I mean, I do gardening, cooking, and decorating, and and mentoring, but what else? And so, writing half a century ago, it's just the beginning of a publication. My publishing years of a series of stories that have to do with culture, because it's all about culture and family culture. So hence why my second book came out 2 years after.
Right.
And then my third book will come out 2 years later.
Absolutely.
Simply because it's not so much the writing process, but the publishing process. So you count all that in until, I'm too old to think.
Right. And this kind of leads now into a little break in between what I like to call the reflective side of being an author. And this is a very, very loaded question, Dr. Arias. So I'll give you some context for this question.
Okay.
So I've been doing this show for about 8 years now. I started around like the pre-COVID years, and then really started refining it during the lockdown years, during like 2019, 2020, and then of course 21, 22, and then slowly but surely began evolving it after those years, after my graduate years at San Francisco State. And in the process of doing this show, I've met so many incredible authors, from those traditionally published, those who are independently published, those who are small press, those who are aspiring, some who are still in school as students, who write poetry, who write screenplays. And I've even brought in to also include the other people in the publishing world, the editors, the narrators, the artists, people who make the covers. But of course, sticking to my roots in history, I also want to give a lot of historians and academic a spotlight as well. So I've had historians from the UK. I've had students here in the United States. I've had professors on the show, and I've learned so much from so many people. And the one thing they all agree on is, in the industry, whether you are in the academic field for history or liberal arts, or if you're in the creative side, the digital age has greatly changed the way we approach creativity and storytelling, with the rise of generative AI making its way into the storytelling process, social media, and how it's become so ingrained in the author's inventory that it seems unheard of not to have a social media presence. And of course, our imposter syndrome and our writer's block is always heightened with everything. It can be overwhelming to a degree.
Yes.
So, my question to you is this, Dr. Arias. With all that said, what would you say is like the fuel that writers and creatives need to put their energy in and not get lost in the social media jargon that we find ourselves in? What would you tell your students this?
Well, it's interesting. This is the question, because I only have social media since publishing half a century ago.
Mm.
And I do not run my social media accounts. I have a former student who runs my social media accounts. And she posts, I send her pictures, I send her the narrative, and then she does what she does. Because number one, is time consuming for me. Number two, I'm not interested in knowing who's eating what, who's traveling where. That's neither here nor there. It's no added value to me. What I do have on social media are writers groups that I've joined, support groups like memoirs and Latin writers and readers and stuff like that. So yes, that I do. I do also understand that social media and AI and all of the technology is here to stay, because it is something that will enhance the arts. I used to see it back in the day with the AP advanced placement art students, because I was their writing coach. Art teacher was there to do the art, but I was their writing coach. So the College Board required them to write about their own techniques and explain away their work. So they learned how to use the technology available back in 2015 through 2021 to enhance their work. Same thing with, I'm assuming, writers. I'm not there yet using the technology available. Number one, because I have to learn it. And number two, I'm too busy thinking the old-fashioned way to stop and learn that piece when I can pay a student to do it for me.
Well said, Dr. Arias. Well said. And I think it is important to always talk about this because, the industry of being an author is not the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yes.
If you look at the internet, for an example, no one ever thought the internet was going to take off as it did, back in the day and be this global thing. No one thought about, author websites or newsletters or all that stuff. But they have changed the thing. And AI is going to be here no matter what. Yeah. We can't.
It's going to be enhanced in 5 years. This is going to be old-fashioned and something which I welcome, because I always welcome innovation. I'm a thinker, so and I'm an artist, a writing artist. So therefore, I always look forward and I love new architecture. So why wouldn't I also love new technology?
Very true. Very, very true. Now, earlier in the interview, you started listing several books not too long ago. So I'm very curious, who are some of the authors you look up to and consider to be your role models?
Well, there was a whole list, but I narrowed it down. I narrowed it down so that I can just accommodate the current, writers. So I love Reina Grandes. work. I mean, it's absolutely out there. I love Julia Alvarez's work. And I tried to mention some male writers, but it was kind of hard to put myself in those shoes because I was trying to do people that were more oriented to the type of writing that I am doing. So Angie Cruz, she wrote Dominicana. And I remember reading that during pandemic and I'm going, wow, this is really where I'm at. So, you know, very few here and there, because I do a lot of reading. But I would say those three writers have really influenced my writing, this kind of writing.
All right. And on the topic of writing, and I think we may have hinted at this in the beginning, but for memoirs, like all books, there's always an intended audience that authors always try to write to. I know there's always been this discussion of, do you write to the market or do you write to the audience and the readership? It's always been this discussion. But for you, Dr. Arias, who is your intended audience for half a century ago?
Young immigrants. And it was intentionally done. And my second book also, it's intended for those immigrant families. In my current work that I am working on, it's really that, because we constantly get pushed to the side, I believe, and we need some uplifting.
Yes, absolutely. And you actually kind of answered my next question, which was, the audience in mind. So now I'm going to ask you the second part to that question, which I think is very important to talk about, which is the balancing between an author's individuality, but understanding the genre that we're writing in. And I'll give some context to this question. For me, my background is historical fiction and fantasy. I write mostly fiction books.
Mm-hmm.
And while I always try to write in my own style, my own voice, I'm very cinematic in my approach to storytelling. I'm very grand. I'm very big. I'm very, very descriptive. I like to take readers on an adventure. But with that said, I also have to be mindful of the genre that I'm writing in, because the audience has certain expectations of how certain stories are supposed to go beat for beat.
Yes.
And it's this balancing act of the two. So for you, Dr. Arias, how did you manage the two? Your individuality, your story, your voice as an author, but also the genre that you're writing in, which is memoirs, and the audience who expects memoirs to go a certain way.
Well, besides being a writer, I'm also a teacher of literature. So I have studied literature. I understand the different genres. I understand that there have been innovative writers throughout history who have changed or modified a genre, but a genre continues to be itself. You know, poetry is still poetry, and narrative still narrative. And you can mix match, but then call it something else. So I tried to, when writing half a century ago, to, when I was editing it, making sure that it remained as a memoir. And one of the things that I had, so Marcia Bradley from Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute was my coach when I was putting the manuscript here together. And she used to say, Angela, you need to write more dialogue. And I used to tell her, Marcia, I can't really do that because this happened 49 years ago. I don't remember who said what, when, where, how, or why. I remember what happened. And I truly believe that a memoir has to be true to what it is.
Right.
You are only going to write in what you remember. That's what memory is. What you remember. You can probably do research, and I could have said my mother thinks that at the time she said this and that and the other. And there are ways to blend it in. But if I didn't remember that dialogue, it wasn't going to be placed in there. And so there is little dialogue in half a century ago for that reason. Because it's a memory that happened 50 years before.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Now, these next two questions, a lot of my guests, specifically those who write memoirs, have found these two questions to be a little tricky to answer. So I'm going to see if you can answer them, Dr. Arias. So the first question is, what other published works do you consider comparable to half a century ago?
Oh, I actually have notes on that because I did a lot of research on this. So I believe, and I mentioned them before, Reina Grande's books. You know, a lot of her books. The Distance Between Us, A Dream Called Home, Andy Cruz Dominicana, because they talk about the experience of the immigrant woman. I mean, they're talking about from the woman's perspective or an older person perspective. I'm talking about it from a child, but it's still an immigrant story, a female immigrant story who comes here to work hard to find the dream that, you know, her parents said, my parents said, you know, we need to follow that American dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for the second question, I think you may have already answered this previously, but I'm wondering, in what other ways does your memoir stand apart from other titles that you have not mentioned previously?
Other than what I said before, probably I am not talking about a lot of the trauma that is common today. And that is something that when I was writing query letters to different publishing houses, you know, the few that reply back would tell me, well, Angela, you need to add more oomph to that. You need to add more drama to it. And I'm sorry, I come from a boring family. There was no big drama other than coming to the United States and working hard and living in the South Bronx that was burning. That was it. That was the big drama. There is no, you know, extreme drama, which I find a lot in many of the memoirs.
All right.
Drain you out because this one went through this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, Dios mío. I don't think you find that in my book.
All right. All right. Now we get into probably my favorite section of the interview, which is the business side of being an author. So as a little icebreaker question, Dr. Arias, when you decided to publish half a century ago, what really surprised you about that aspect of the author's journey?
That it actually takes so long to find someone or someplace that you can publish. However, I wasn't really, because I'm an avid reader, so I wasn't really surprised to just be turned down, turned down, turned down. And eventually, you know, I just went hybrid, which means you pay for it. And then my second time I said, forget about the hybrid. I'm just doing this myself.
Right.
I'm just going to learn how to do it. And if nobody buys the book, too bad. At least I wrote it. So the business part, the marketing, all of that is my least favorite part. I don't mind going to a ton of schools and talking about it. Even when many times, and that's what I do, I bring a class set to the school. I bring a class set. So if somebody invites me, a teacher invites me, I am going to bring a class set as a thank you to the kids, because I want kids to read this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you've already mentioned earlier in the interview that you're also a member of several writing communities and writing groups. I would like to know, by being a part of these different groups, how has your writing changed over the years?
Well, I believe that artists and any professional needs to be part of a community of like-minded people who do the who have similar kinds of skills, who have similar kinds of goals. So for many years, I've been part of the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute, and I've taken so many of their courses that I should have just gone for an MFA, but that's neither here nor there. But I enjoy, because it's learning. So as an educator, I believe that learning never really stops, and I continue to push myself. There are other organizations like the Dominican Writers Association that I also take all of their workshops that they offer. I'm actually going to their retreat in Zona Colonial in Santo Domingo this coming summer. And it's an intense retreat for 20 writers who live outside of the Dominican Republic to come back home and learn about genealogy.
Awesome. That is incredible. That is amazing, Dr. Arias. And this kind of goes into a question that you kind of already answered before. But as an indie author, what also surprised you about that aspect of the publishing industry? Because, again, for those who don't know, being an indie author is not easy. Yes, you do retain more creative control over your work, but it's mainly out of pocket in terms of the cover, in terms of the format,
Everything.
editor, and everything. It's a lot. So when you decided to go down that direction for half a century ago, how much research did you look into what goes into indie authors, or those who become indie authors?
I did a lot of research so I did the research before I went for half a century ago publishing. However, I had never published. So even though I already had an idea how to do this as an indie author, I did not want to do it myself. So I pay somebody to do it. And then the second time around, I was already more savvy and knew people in the business. This one does this one does the other, through the different groups that I belong to. So it was pretty easy. And then, you know, there are coaches that are actually, for a minimal fee, will walk you through the process of uploading this, you know, formatting that, it's that and the other.
All right.
So you know, as a writer or any artist, you have to do your research. You have to know the industry, because otherwise it's too overwhelming, and that can turn you away from even considering it.
That is very true. That is very true. Research is definitely important. And we're now reaching the final two questions before I get into the closing segment, Dr.
Okay.
Arias. And I'm actually going to combine these two together.
Okay.
So you've talked about books and authors that have been, inspirations for you, or you've used them as a research tool.
Mhm.
But I wonder, are there any other books that challenge you to elevate your writing and inspire you to do more? And are there any authors that you have met in your writing groups and writing circles who have been the biggest supporters of you over the years? Or are there any students or family members or even faculty members that have been there by your side from the get-go?
Yes, there are plenty. I look at Julia Alvarez, and I only wish someday I can write as good as she. And I met her recently here at University of Albany. She was a speaker, and I said that to her. I've also met many years ago Pedro Mir, which is the national Dominican poet. And he invited me to his home, and I spent 3 wonderful hours. And I was in my late 20s, and he said to me, Angela, you need to write. So that has always resonated in my head. The national poet tells me this. He must have seen something in the little poem that I brought to him. And then, like I said, my instructor, Marcia Bradley. I have Elizabeth Horst, who has helped me through the Elizabeth Writing Corner. If it hadn't been for her, I would have never self-published my second book. And Donald Hardison as well. It's one of my biggest supporters. So this is a reader who is also a writer who discovered me through half a century ago and sent me a beautiful visual of one of the chapters. This is a couple of years ago. And that's what I mean about people reaching out that I know who they are. But my email is at the end of the book, and people do email me stuff.
Awesome. That is absolutely amazing.
You know, those people in the past and in the present have encouraged me, including top writers like Julia Alvarez.
Nice. Absolutely incredible. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we arrive at the closing segment of this incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Now, Dr. Arias, I'm so happy to have had you here on the show. Before we wrap everything up officially, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect and buy a copy of your books? And what would be your word of wisdom to fellow authors and writers listening to this interview?
That was a lot of questions together, but let's see. So my website is angelaariasauthor.com. And so there you can find all of my social media if you look me up. There is actually, my new book is being summarized every Friday.
Ooh.
Yes, for the next 20 Fridays. So you can find that on both Instagram, Facebook, and other social media platforms. And words of inspiration to authors. Was that the last question?
Mm-hmm.
I believe if you are a true writer, you are an artist, and artists don't quit. And artists reinvent themselves.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I began writing poetry and then complaints in my little book 50 years ago. And then I ended up writing memoirs.
Absolutely. You know, we all go through changes. We all find our voice, and we get better as time goes on until we find our stride.
Yes. You are what you do for 10,000 hours, said a famous man.
Well said, Dr. Arias. And with that, we officially end this incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'll be linking all that information down below in the description of this video. And be on the lookout for a Wandering Scribe teaser, an early chapter read of Dr. Arias's book, half a century ago, which I'll be making this week. So be on the lookout for when that episode drops. And again, a huge thank you to Dr. Arias for coming on the show. If you would like to see her back in a follow-up author interview or in an episode of the Writers Hub, where she talks about an aspect of the writing journey, the author's journey, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Until then, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. Signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.